It's Tuesday. Welcome back, everybody. We have recruited somebody very interesting from the place called the Entertainment and Sports Network Programming Company, some little outfit in Bristol, Connecticut, not too far from Milford, where I grew. My mom grew up. Anyway, Chris Fallica, we welcome you. He is on College Game Day every week, and more importantly, this guy's a really nice guy. He's one of the few mainstream media talents that actually knows what they're talking about when it comes to betting. And it's just hard to find. And to give you an example, he was leading. I don't know how you finished after this week, but he was leading the William Hill college contest, first place, and I believe that's $500,000 or I think that's $500,000 for first place, or is that 250? I forget. But and then he was 6-0 in his ESPN column last week. He knows what he's talking about. So please, Ron and I welcome you. Can you just briefly? I'm shocked. This guy has a normal life. Okay, when you look up somebody in Wikipedia, I was all prepared for this maze of events that got him to ESPN. And this guy is just a regular guy. He did it the normal way. Can you explain how you ended up at ESPN?
I'm pretty boring, right? I'm just that's why I think I kind of resonate with a lot of people, because I'm just like the normal sports fan, like a normal dude. I just happened to fall into a platform, and I'm grateful for it. No, I grew up on Long Island, and I went to the University of Miami and was an intern in the sports information department there for 4 years. So I worked in the athletic department as a student assistant. And whenever, I'm going to give you the longer version because in case you care, I wound up working a Knicks Heat game one night because we would get hired out to do stats for visiting radio and TV networks. And being from Long Island, I worked for FAN one night and just flat out asked Mike Breen about the possibilities of an internship over the summer at FAN. And he was like, absolutely, call me when we get back from the road trip and I'll take care of you. Get you in touch with the right person. So we did that. And then one of the people from EWFAN wound up moving up to ESPN Radio, when they first got started in like 1995, I believe it was. And heard I was just out of college looking for a job. So he called me and was like, hey, it's 2 days a week. It's weekends. It's 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday. I'm like, sign me up. I just had to get my foot in the door. And then the following year, the College Game Day research position opened up in '96. So and I just happened to be directed in that way with the research manager there at the time. I remember him coming over to the radio department one afternoon on a Saturday or Sunday. It was like, hey, I hear you're a big college football guy, and I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, I think I have the job for you, and it was like perfect. So. I really just happened to just get lucky with a lot of my career moves. And to answer a previous question, I didn't even like care to look at the standings this past week because I know I'm 4-4 in the contest, and I was like, I'm not even going to bother. But someone who is in the contest as well sent me a text, and I noticed at 17-7, which is what I am right now, is still tied for the lead. So as bad as last week went for me, I went into the week one up, and now I'm tied. So I'll take that as a result for. But you know what I hate about that contest sometimes is just the games that are on the sheet. Like there were three games in the ESPN.com that I liked and I would have used in the contest, but unfortunately weren't on the Wheel contest. And of course, I go 1-2 in the three games that I kind of replaced them with. So I got bad luck, but you know what? I'm at the top of the leaderboard after 3 weeks. I can't complain.
This is going to be an interesting show because Ron is more versed in the NCAA topics and he's going to take over. But I want one last fluff question for Chris here before. By the way, we're both in the VEASAN Invitational, and you're up at the third place, I think I saw, and I'm running it alphabetically. I thought that was a good strategy. My name started with Z. I thought that might be a good strategy, but I don't think it's going to pan out. But I want to ask you, last fluff question. We're going to end this show with some really funny, some interesting stories about South Africa that relates to each of us. Mm-hmm. So hang on for that. We don't want to tie up the time at the beginning of the show, but I just want to ask you, what's the best thing about being having a visible position on a major network like ESPN? And if you're able to, what's the worst part?
I think the worst part I think is kind of, I mean, I don't want to say you always have to be on your best behavior, because you should be respectful and always on your best behavior. But I think it's just being aware of, like, if people notice you kind of, you don't want to be that guy. I mean, you need to be respectful, polite, kind of not create a flight's canceled. You can't be blowing a gasket. You're pissed off or whatever. You just gotta have to just be aware of your public surroundings. So I think that's the worst thing. And the best thing is it kind of, I mean, it beats a real job. I mean, I cover sports, and I go to an NFL game on Thursday night, and sometimes I go to 2 college football games on Saturday. So it's like that's a pretty good deal, and I like being able to have. I guess after so many years of being behind the scenes on game day, now being able to in giving me, whether it was Kirk or Chris or Reese or Coach or whomever, kind of my opinion, and they would either use it or throw it aside. Like being able to have a platform now to kind of voice my opinion or my take on a game or a topic, that's pretty damn cool. Like if you would have told 14-year-old Chris Fallica in East Riches, Long Island, that in 30 years you're going to be sitting there at a ESPN, or you're going to be sitting courtside with Dick Vitale at the Final Four, you're going to be sitting at the college football national championship game giving picks on the air. I don't know if I would have believed it.
And the beautiful thing is you're an all-around really nice, sincere person in real life, and it's really nice to see. Ron, I'm sorry for leaving you in the dark for I can't see the clock. No. 7 minutes again. Jeez, take over, pal. What do you got to?
I kind of divided my questions into 2 parts. I figured part 1, talk about a process and other things, and part 2, dive into some teams and games. So in terms of my part 1 is, the first thing that comes to mind as you're talking is, boy, time management must be one hell of a tough ride for you in terms of putting on your handicapper hat and then putting on your, quote unquote work hat and stuff like that. So what is it like after the Saturday games are over? How do you get to the business of handicapping?
Well, I think it's interesting because my week, they're kind of intertwined now, because on Mondays I do the Daily Wager show, and it kind of gives me a good start on Sunday night and Monday morning to kind of get a feel as to what's out there. And so I'll look at the openers, and sometimes every week I put together a big note to get College Gameday off the ground. And the last thing that I will do after putting together my ideas is, hey, I'll jot something down, like, and a lot of people are going to be surprised to see that Iowa State's a 3.5-point favorite over Kansas. You can probably count the number of Iowa State tickets on 2 hands that will be written this week, because Kansas will probably be a massive public underdog. So that's something that interests me as a bettor, and I think it interests people that are non-bettors as well. I think that's kind of my role on game day, is to try and create gambling content or conversation that even if you're not betting on a game, you're like, hey, the team that's 4-0 is a home underdog to a team that just lost a game to Baylor and has a loss and hasn't looked great. So I think that might find be interesting to some people. But yeah, in terms of the handicapping, I get an earlier start because of that, and just because of where I live and where I go. I mean, there are a lot of times that if I want to play something, I'm going to have to play it before I leave on Wednesday to get out of town. Fortunately, we've been in some spots where my access to the apps have been in other states. But I like monitoring the movement throughout the week and seeing the way certain games go. And sometimes I'm kind of a contrarian bettor, but by chance. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Last week it worked out in one game with Texas A&M where I got the best of the number at 1.5, and sometimes it doesn't, where I had Michigan State +3, and that was the best number you could have gotten there, and they were never in the game. So like any other processes, it has its pluses and minuses.
Ron, you had a line movement question.
Yeah. So the line movement question I had is, sometimes, for example, I've got my bets in at various times during the week, but on Saturdays, some of the ones I haven't played, or I'm waiting for a number. And if that number hits, I'm going to play it. If that number doesn't hit, then I don't play it. Do you just then, because you're so busy on Saturday, just play it at a number you're not comfortable with, or how does the time management work on a Saturday, or do you care about placing wagers on a Saturday?
If I am somewhere where I can, I absolutely care about it. And the great thing about my role on the show is I have the wager talk screen up throughout the show, monitoring what's going on with the numbers. And if I see an interesting tidbit, I'll kind of get in the producer's ear, or if Patrick Everson, who tweets out something interesting, I'll mention that on there a couple of weeks ago, just about a move, or just some John Murray I'm in touch with quite often as well, and he'll give me some interesting tidbits every now and then to throw out. But I think I have gotten better, I think, for the most part recently, about, like you had said, waiting for a number. There are a lot of times where if a dog was 6.5 and I was hoping to get 7 and it didn't hit 7, I didn't play it. I think in the past there probably would have been times where, 6.5, 7, what's the difference, right? Well, it's only a half a point. And of course, the game lands on 7. It's a massive difference. So you learn from your mistakes in the past. And I think that's one of the things that I've gotten a lot better at, is waiting for a better number. And if it doesn't get there, that's the biggest advantage we have as players. You don't have to play the game.
Absolutely.
They have to put a number up on every game. If you don't get the number that you want, pass.
How often do you get a lead on information that's not public, and does it take longer than a few minutes for it to hit the internet?
There have been a couple of instances in the past where, if we have the game on our air, sometimes we'll get a little tidbit about, hey, we don't think he's playing, and you have to keep it in confidence. And that's one of the things that we're told, basically, like, not to use information that we get from coaching, from whether it's a coach or a meeting or an SID or whatever. Don't use that in a way to profit off of it. So I kind of have to respect that. But I can remember, certainly in the COVID year, like, we would get here, like, oh, he's not playing, and then obviously that doesn't come out until like 15 minutes or a half hour before the game, when the schools finally would release their active rosters and their dress list. But there are quite a few times that you get wind of something, and I'm sure one of the things that we'll be tracking this week and looking forward to find out. I'm just out of curiosity, is like, will Tua play on Thursday night? And my guess is probably, knowing his pain threshold and what he dealt with at Alabama, my guess is that he probably will play on Thursday night.
Okay. So you mentioned, we talked a little bit off air about a particular game last week. I think it was Iowa-Rutgers, in terms of gifted a couple of touchdowns for Iowa. Do you go through personally the box scores beforehand? Do you look for some nuggets as far as what really happened in the games? Do you have time to do that?
Absolutely. No, that's one of the things I love doing. I love going through and seeing teams that may have been in the red zone 5 times and they came away with 4 field goals, or the opposing team's touchdown drives came off of 3 turnovers and one was a 5-yard drive. Things like that tell what was the peak win probability, or the average win probability, or post-game win expectancy. For like Indiana, I think Western Kentucky was a ridiculous game where Western Kentucky dominated the game. Unfortunately, they covered the number, but they probably should have won outright. So those are things that, if you're not doing it, or you don't have a way to access someone's information who is doing it, you're missing out, because you just can't look at a box score and see a final score and look at total yards and think you're getting the whole story, because you're not.
What resources do you find the most value in?
Well, fortunately, I have access to our internal database at ESPN, which is great. I mean, I can mine for whatever statistical information that I want. But I think Bill Connolly does an excellent job. I'll give him a pop, who does work for ESPN, who used to be with SB Nation. He does the post-game win expectancy report every week. He puts out great box scores that he tweets out every week and kind of points to some highlights. And so he does a lot of the work for me, but there still are, if I'm interested in a game that maybe I didn't see him do something for, I'll go back and look at the final score from a couple of weeks before, look inside the records. I'll try and compare like record compared to power rating and just try to give people an idea as to why, hey, it's possible for a team that's 2-2 to be favored over a team that's 4-0 based on who they've played and what the power ratings are.
Maybe more so in NFL than in college, but it comes into play in college for me as well, is I'm looking at snap counts, and I'm looking at that in correlation with injuries. Like if there's many running backs, who's the second running back, who's the second quarterback, who's the second at a position. Do you care at all? Do you research snap counts at all?
I don't. That's actually an interesting thing. The one thing I'm curious about snap counts is, I guess it kind of comes into play, at least for me, in projecting a game in terms of like a situational handicap type where, okay, you're going to expect starters to play fewer snaps, like NC State last week against UConn, like Kentucky last week against Northern Illinois.
Right.
How do you make, being that you're talking about snap points, do you make any sort of adjustment consideration, think about a game last week like in Tampa or in Miami, like you mentioned the NFL, like Miami, Buffalo, and Tampa and Green Bay both playing in real extreme heat last week. Do you think that that's something that can have an effect if they're playing excessive snaps in a game like that, in a situation like that?
Yeah, the fatigue factor, especially early in the year for me, Pittsburgh Steelers were an example. Preseason is treated like the plague from a lot of different teams. So then Pittsburgh goes week 1 and they play 70 minutes against Cincinnati. Then they got another mentally tough game against New England. Week 3, the short week against Cleveland. Snap counts really did come into play for me there, and fatigue, physical and mental, came into play for me with Pittsburgh. So it's something I look at. It's something I chart in terms of who's playing first half versus second half, and whether or not I think, okay, they didn't run that well in this particular game, but they didn't have to. But maybe hidden will be that they'll run well, whether it be college and pro, in the next game, because they just didn't have to use that running back. So
it's curious, because I think one thing, I don't know if it's something you, Chris, or you do already. I think one thing we're going to be seeing a lot more of in the NFL is monitoring and tracking what starters are playing in the preseason, because Atlanta, I think, is a great example. Like, they were supposed to be one of the worst teams in the league, if not the worst team in the league, and they played their starters quite a bit in the preseason, and it's shown. They very easily could have a better record than they even have right now, but they go on the road, they beat Seattle. They probably should have won the openers, but I think the fact that they play that, it's going to give, I think, teams a leg up early in the year if these guys are used to kind of being on the same page together, especially with the new quarterback with Mariota.
Well, I think we hit the brick wall here with the change in outlook. We're not going to see preseason handled like that again. We had 12 teams didn't play their quarterback. 3 of them won week 1. We're just seeing teams that are just unprepared. And as you mentioned, with Atlanta hitting the ball, hitting the field running and seeing some positive results on that. I don't think there's going to be a single person that talks about the Miami-Cincinnati game without mentioning the snap counts were like 90-40. They're throwing away their power ratings, even though Miami is the higher power rated team. Just ignore it. It is hard to ignore the short week, the extra reps. We already know the road teams on Thursday don't perform very well. That's going to be a very tricky situation. Can it really just boil down to snap counts is going to, give you the winner?
Yeah, I'm surprised the Dolphins are power rated a little bit higher than the Bengals. You look at Cincinnati, like their couple of games, they were 6.5 point favorites, and they probably should have won both of them. I mean, you drop 2 games like that. The Jets game, not the Jets game, the Steelers game, they absolutely should have won week 1, and they were certainly in position to beat Dallas as well. It kind of feels like that win Sunday against the Jets. I mean, while the Jets are one of the worst teams in the league, the fact that their defense played so much better, it feels like, to me, it feels like Cincinnati is the right side in this game, even though, like you said, the Dolphins might have a higher power rating. I think there are a lot of things, like you mentioned, the short week and that game on Sunday really coming into play here.
Yeah, see, 2 points I make there is, and Chris knows I've harped upon preseason for a long time. It matters. Houston, Atlanta played better in preseason, even though I think Houston's poorly coached. They are 3-0 against the spread. And to some people, that's more important than what their record is. So they're 3-0 against the spread because they're prepared. But now that we played 3 weeks, you got to throw out whether preseason mattered or not, because everybody is in condition now.
Yeah.
So, with the exception of maybe the Miami game, only because it's a Thursday and not a Sunday game, and so the body has less time. If you throw that one out, the teams that got a leg up in the preseason, Joe Burrow didn't even play. He had a certain a medical procedure.
Yep.
So they were behind the 8 ball from the start. Well, who wouldn't predict that they just couldn't hit the ground running.
Do you think that the fact that these teams all have equal games under their belt right now, you think probably going to see some more unders come in? Do you think that's going to be something that there might be a little over correction on the books part, and maybe the totals might be a little bit lower now, and that might be something that we can capitalize on?
Yes and no. I think because we had 9 new coaches in the league, a lot of them are going to find their way. They're going to bumble their way through until they get a bye week to really reassess everything. I think I heard it on either the Sunday night or the Monday night telecast, where they just basically said the game's too fast for these new coaches right now. They need that week to recalibrate. So right now we're going to see new coaches probably not be able to make adjustments, unless you're the Miami coach who's hit the ground running.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the other coaches just are showing the fact that they're not ready, understandably so, to take on the lead coaching job. So I think some of their adjustments are going to wait at least to the mini bye or the bye week.
Well, and you saw even a second-year head coach, Dan Campbell, blew the Lions game with just poor judgment. It takes a while to get your footing as a head coach. There's just so many moving parts there, the clock, the strategy, all these different things. And they're in the earlier in the season, the more of these mistakes that we see. We saw a lot of botched field goals earlier, I remember, in week 1. Just very interesting to see how the season evolves, and these teams are going to become more efficient. I think we're going to see some teams that didn't look good the first couple of weeks that are going to finally get their act together, and I think we're going to see some pretenders kind of exposed. What do you guys think?
Oh yeah, no, I think it's crazy that you're going to look at and see that either the Bears or the Giants are going to be 3-1, which is incredible, and the prices on them to miss the playoffs are still going to be a massive no favorite. But I'm curious though, like a team like New England, who we're used to being good with Mac Jones being hurt now. I mean, is Brian Hoyer really going to be the guy to come in and right that ship? Like, I think people might expect a team like New England, who's gotten off to a slow start. There's no way that Belichick won't have a losing record, but you look at that roster, there ain't a hell of a lot there. But you probably could have gotten a nice price on a preseason bet that the division order would be like Miami, Buffalo, Jets, New England, if that indeed is something that could possibly happen.
Yeah, I think with New England, there's just not enough team speed, and they're playing a little close to the vest. I think with proper preparation, Belichick will keep games close, but how do you trust the rookie quarterback or Brian Hoyer to pull something out in the fourth quarter or even in a close game?
And I think I think the fact about the makeup of that coaching staff too was something that people had a concern about before the year. Man, Matt Patricia calling plays. It's like Bill Belichick trying to be like smartest man in the land. Look, I think the world of Belichick as a head coach and how successful he's been, but I think he kind of outsmarted himself a little bit here, thinking that he could just bring his guys in here. It didn't matter what position or they were or what coordinator they were in, and it would work. As clearly it's not.
Wasn't there a dog on Hong Kong Fooey that used to have that funny laugh? That was Detroit Lions fans when Matt Patricia went to New England. It's like,
it's a shame to see. I have an off-the-wall college question for you that's probably not asked much, but we want to be unique.
Sure.
Freshman performances can change a team. Penn State, the hat I'm wearing today, they have a freshman running back. But even more importantly, Cal's dormant offense found a running back that ran for 270 plus yards. How do you factor that in terms of handicapping moving forward? Because Cal's not the same team that we thought in August that they are now.
No, they're not. And that's something that I think it's a little bit of a guess more than anything early in the year. And you really need to have some good connections within the program, whether it's a coach, whether it's an equipment guy or a support staffer, or somehow be like, hey, watch out for whatever. Like I can remember last year with Ohio State, Trevion Henderson was that guy people were talking about. Who was Master Teague was the upperclassman, and it was like, no. 32 is going to be the guy, and he went out in that first game against Minnesota and had a deal. So it's not only freshmen, it's the transfer portal now. It's like you're basically being able to – it's glorified free agency for the most part. So where you see it with USC, you see it with you see it with Texas, you see it with a lot of teams. Like you can just kind of go out and fill your roster with guys who you feel can perform and fill some holes. So that I think is a little bit more clearer as to, okay, these are legit guys who are going to come in and perform at a high level, like USC has, like Quinn Ewers did at Texas before he got hurt, like some of the other guys have as well. Justin Fields at Ohio State when he transferred from Georgia. So like those I think are safe for guesses. But I think with freshmen, it's hard because a lot of times you can fall into some coaches that are afraid to play freshmen. They're not going to play them till later in the year. And I'm glad you brought up Penn State, because that was one of the things that I've been waiting for a couple of years at Penn State, because they've had some great recruiting classes. And I used to joke, I joked a couple of years ago with a staffer like 2021 Penn State. That's the team I'm looking forward to, and it just never panned out. But this year with Singleton, running back, he gives them a dynamic player at that position. They haven't had since Saquon left.
Yeah, it really changes the equation. I see the scroll down there on disproportionate schedules. We got a doozy this week, Washington and UCLA. And my metrics, I do a lot of things that I think I do well in college football. One of the things I'd like to do better is how to figure out the disproportionate schedules. UCLA's played nobody, and Washington's played a couple of tough teams. How do you go about analyzing a game like that?
That's one thing you were talking about, like the resources I have in my database. I have a way to just kind of filter everything out by, if I want to say, versus FBS, versus Power 5, versus I can throw all the crap stats out against your FCS teams and or whomever, your non-Power 5 teams, and just kind of get a much more accurate feel as to what these teams' strengths and weaknesses are. And I agree. It's funny. I'm glad you brought this game up, because Washington was a team that I was a lot higher on before the year than I think a lot of people, just because the coaching change was a massive upgrade to Kalen DeBoer. You bring in Michael Penix, who he was familiar with from Indiana, and clearly this was an offense under Jimmy Lake, which was just disastrous. So I was higher on Indiana. I am pretty close with Chip Kelly. So I mean, Chip's a friend of mine. So I have a good feel, I think, about his team. I haven't spoken to him this week, by the way, but I think there are enough warning signs with how UCLA is kind of sneak by. It was good for them just to come out and crush Colorado like they should have. But I think the South Alabama game and some other games, like some slow starts, I think Washington might be the right side in this game as well. I think the Huskies are pretty good. And certainly the winner for Michigan State is better than anything that UCLA, I think, certainly has on their schedule.
Sure.
That Michigan State game's a doozy this week, as far as I'm concerned.
That's a game that I wouldn't want any part of, because there is a chance that Michigan State might stink. I mean, coming off, I think they were a little overrated coming off of last year's. I mean, regression is a you-know-what, but at the same time, do you really want to back Maryland after kind of playing in a 4-quarter game as a big dog against Michigan? Now you're laying north of a touchdown. I don't know if I'd want any part of that game.
My handicap actually leads to Michigan State. It was making me nauseous, so I'm trying to get off of it.
I understand that completely. Is Utah a playoff team in your opinion?
No, I don't think they're a playoff team. They're a good team. I think when the committee starts, if Utah does wind up beating USC in a couple of weeks and go on and win the Pac-12 title, I think they're going to throw their schedule and statistics up in the room. And I don't know what Florida's final record's going to be, but that Florida loss week 1 probably will be a big topic of conversation in that room. And I'm actually curious if Utah will wind up getting through the schedule, because losing Casey, the tight end, is a massive loss for an offense that isn't really full of dynamic playmakers, and he's kind of Mr. Do It Everything. And I know Kyle Winningham even mentioned that's the one guy we couldn't afford to lose.
He's my third rated tight end coming in, into this year behind him. Yeah, and it is a big loss.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if they're going to get through with only one loss, but I think even if they do, it will. I mean, look, it's hard to give absolutes because you don't really know what's going to happen in these other conferences. The Big 12 probably won't have a playoff contender, I wouldn't think. The SEC, and we're probably looking at a situation where they may get 2 again. Obviously, Ohio State is there. What happens if Ohio State and Michigan are both undefeated when they play, and the loser's sitting there with 1 loss and doesn't go to Indy? I mean, there's a chance you could be looking at Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Georgia, depending on what happens in the SEC. Yeah. Someone with an Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State versus the field ticket, I'd be more than happy with that.
Yeah, Chris, what's the biggest mistake that you used to make in handicapping that you've washed your hands from, that you no longer use, and you realized you were a moron for doing it? And what addition have you found to your handicapping that you find the most value in today?
I think the biggest thing that I've gotten away from is, I mentioned how I'm contrarian. I used to be much more contrarian than I was now. I would just, the public's on that side, all the guys like that side, I'm just going to play the other side just for the sake of doing it and being different and trying to be smartest guy in the room. Like I made a ton of mistakes just being stupid and betting terrible sides at bad numbers just because there's no way that they're going to win. Vegas always knows. I mean, that year, that stupid moniker. But I used to just play overly contrarian, and then I realized, now, you know what? There's a reason some of these lines are moving the way they are, and the end result showed. So I think that's the thing that I've gotten better about in terms of just not playing bad teams. So now you want the thing that I've gotten worse at, or
no? What have you added to your arsenal that you shockingly find very valuable or beneficial for your handicapping?
I think not being afraid to lay points on the road, I think, is something that I've added to like my thought process, where, I mean, the common perception is home team getting points, but at the same time, there's a reason some of these road teams are 3.5, whatever, 4-point favorites on the road against these home teams. And I think a lot of times people will kind of take a look at a home dog north of a field goal, when a lot of times that is just kind of a random home field projection number, when in actuality, if you look at the actual power ratings and the stats and you kind of wipe the slate clean with a lot of the garbage stats, it does add up to a pretty significant edge for the road team. So I think that's one thing, not being afraid to lay to a point, lay points on the road, which is something that I'll
the same transition with NFL recently. I used to automatically just rule out games that were over a touchdown. And over the recent years, actually, double-digit favorites are covering at a pretty decent rate. So I have added the larger, I feel like the NFL is becoming a little bit more of the have and have-nots, like NCAA in a little bit. So I've started to lay the wood on NFL favorites, over the last year or two, and because they're covering. people are afraid. We grew up saying you never lay double digits in the NFL. Well, yeah, you do.
I haven't made that transition yet, but I'm glad you talked about the road teams in college, because offline, if you remember, Chris, we had this conversation. I was looking at my card last week in college, and I said, I don't have enough road teams.
Yeah.
And, there's so much talk about what home field advantage is worth nowadays, college and NFL. But if you have a team especially if you have a running team that really doesn't care about the crowd noise on passing and, protecting their quarterback and and loud noises and stuff like that. If you're just running the ball, I want to have some road teams in my arsenal. And I publicly said that to Chris. I said, I need to find some more road teams last week. And it worked.
And it's funny because I brought up the UCLA Colorado game before. And a lot of times when you Colorado is one of the worst teams in the country. There is no home field anything there. They couldn't make that number high enough. I mean, UCLA covered it easily. Now, did a lot of people want to lay 21 or 24, whatever that thing closed at? No, but it wound up being a relatively easy winner because you go on the road and what's the road? UCLA didn't care about going on the road to play that game against a terrible team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you handicap the totals at all in NCAA? Any tricks on that for you, or you leave
not as much as I probably should? I guess if you look at our contest, Chuck does an unbelievable job. I think there was the first week. I think he played 5 college totals, and I think he went 5-0. So it's like that is something that. Really sharp handicap with you, but I think it's more of a time thing with me. I'm actually glad you asked that question though, because that's something that I wanted to throw back at you guys this week. Like, at what point with some of these games in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia region with the Storm heading in there, at what point do you say, okay, this is too much of an overreaction? Clemson, NC State's down to whatever. I know it was 42 early this morning. Like, at what point are you like, okay, I'm hopping in on the under. This is the 7-point move or whatever it is way too much.
The 2 words that come to mind when you phrase that question, great question, is wind and style. The wind matters more to me than anything else, but also style. Are you a pure running team? Do you mix up the run and the pass? I'm going to factor in all those things before I decide what the ceiling or floor number is I'm going to take on a total in a bad weather game. So I need to know how the teams play, how many times they're passing versus running, what kind of accuracy their quarterback is, and then what is the wind factor. Chris?
Almost a decade ago, the old weather angles used to be, it's gonna be this way. Yeah. And I believe that too many people are already aware of this. And I saw people commenting on Twitter saying, it's Monday morning and everything's moved. I'm ready to buy back the other way. So, you can't just be, and this goes for contest strategy, betting strategy, everything. Just because you know that this may happen, you can't just blindly go ahead and do this, certain things. And it doesn't apply to every game and every situation. And you have to be careful. From what I was reading on Twitter this morning, it was like, well, I think I might be more interested in the over, as you referenced, Chris, because there's just no overreaction of too many people pounding it. And there is a limit of reaction that a line can hold before you got to switch to the other side.
Yeah. In the NFL, it seems like when the totals go down like that, weather related, it seems to hold up pretty good. At least that's what I've been noticing. When something goes down, there's some sharp action going there. But the college, I think sometimes it's a guessing game, especially like you said on Monday, because we don't know if the Storm will. I'm not a weather predictor, thank goodness. Right. And they bat about 50% as well.
Right, exactly.
So we should have weathermen in the contest.
Yeah, we should. That would be great. But it's funny. I think there are people that just kind of handicap based on weather. I don't know how you do. How can you project the path of a storm or the track of a weather system 4 or 5 days out with any certainty whatsoever? So, I was just curious because I only like trying to figure out like knowing that I'm going there, and Clemson feels pretty confident about most of the worst weather being to the east. Now, it's still going to rain. I think they're expecting like 15, 20-mile winds, but I think that probably gives Clemson an advantage because they're a better running team than NC State. Even with the corner, the great offensive lineman last year that got drafted, they had trouble running the ball, and they're still having trouble running the ball. And I'm not sure Leary will be able to throw the ball up and down the field in that game. So as much as if they were to rematch in the ACC championship game, or if this game were played on a dry field with no wind and Leary was able to throw against a bad Clemson secondary, I might give NC State a real chance. But I think the conditions of this game Saturday night will probably favor Clemson. But obviously, we're still 3-4 days out, so that could certainly change.
Yeah. Do you have any surprise teams or teams that are just flying under the radar? I almost feel like Penn State is flying under the radar.
Penn State is absolutely flying under the radar. How they are not ranked ahead of some of these teams in the top 10 it is amazing to me. Now, look, are Purdue and Auburn great by any means? No, but you know what? They're Power 5 teams. They went on the road in true road games and won those games. Obviously, the next couple of weeks we'll know more with Penn State, between Michigan, Minnesota, and Ohio State coming up. But I think the Lions are really good. I think all gives them a little bit of a change of pace at quarterback and does some things that Clifford can't. But yeah, no, they're certainly one. I mean, obviously, I can't use Washington as a surprise team anymore because kind of the cat's out of the bag with them. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else I was kind of higher or lower on. Sorry, go ahead.
Would you call Texas Tech a surprise team or just a lucky team? They've got 2 overtime wins.
I think a little bit of both. If that yes, I mean, a little bit of both, I would say. Just maybe leaning a little bit more towards the luck. I think, because they really, again, you look at the post-game win expectancy of that Texas game, and it was totally slanted in Texas's favor. And they made the plays. They got forced to fumble in overtime and won. But I think they're still a dangerous team when they're catching points because of Donovan Smith and that offense. Certainly in Lubbock more often than that. Their defense has actually played a lot better than what you would normally expect from them.
I agree.
I wanted to ask you, is any rumblings of people of teams going more toward the run at all? I've been noticing that the yards per carry is higher, and I talked about that with Ron this morning, and he had some interesting viewpoints on that. But I'm just kind of curious because I always chart how many teams are over 60%. Plays are passing plays versus running plays, and it's just fewer teams this year, and yards per carry is higher.
It's interesting because I think offenses are cyclical. I remember, I guess it would have been how long ago it was Harbaugh at Stanford, and he had that intellectual brutality, and they had success because not many people ran an offense that just shoved it right down your throat with the fullback and a tight end and a really good back. And I think defenses now have kind of adjusted in a way where they're expecting teams to come out with some type of trips package, spread offense, shotgun, passing around. I am surprised that more teams haven't tried to maybe throw in more of a power running game, because I don't think a lot of these defenses are ready, or the roster composition and game plan wise, they're not ready for situation. I remember a couple of years ago, the North Carolina-Miami game down in South Florida, Carolina, with how they were known for throwing the ball all over the place, and they came out and just capitalized on the weakness of Miami, which was their rush defense, and had, I think, 2 guys run for 200 yards in that game. So I think a power running game still has a place in the sport, and I think the number of teams, if they decided to commit to it for at least a game, would probably be pleasantly surprised with the results.
Yeah, that seems like a good point. So let me transition to a team whose defense has outscored its offense in 2 games this year, and that would be the Iowa Hawkeyes. You know, I think that there are such long-term trends, situations, whatever you want to call it. I feel like I know Iowa's program backwards and forwards because the coach has been there for 20 years and the coach before that was there for 20 years. Why can't they get the offense right?
I think it's probably a couple of reasons. Number one, you've got a head coach who has his son as the offensive coordinator, and he's comfortable and he knows he's never going to be fired, and there's no reason for him to ever to change. And they like to run the ball with the traditional and really play very close to the vest. And I think a lot of it has to do with their recruiting base and the guys they go after. I mean, remember it was 2005 or 4, was it, when they had Brad Banks at quarterback, and they had a good offense. They had a dual threat quarterback who was in the Heisman race, and they made the Orange Bowl, and they had NFL type wide receivers and running backs. And for whatever reason, I don't know if they've changed their recruiting philosophy. I don't know if the stuff that happened off the field a couple of years ago had anything to do with changing their philosophy and the kids not wanting to go there. But it seems like the pressure this year has been more than ever for Kirk to make a change on the offensive staff. So I'll be curious to see if they do it, because like you said last week, I had Iowa. I laid the points. Like we talked about laying points on the road. I laid the 8 points on the road with Iowa last week, and it did win. But again, you look at it and kind of go, all right, it's like the Iowa voodoo doll. It's what they relied on all of last year, early in the year, and that great start with turnovers, non-offensive touchdowns. And is that something that's really sustainable? It really isn't. So I would expect the Hawkeyes to come, I don't say crashing back down to earth, because they've already got a loss on their schedule and not a whole lot of confidence that they're going to want to win the Big Ten West. But they're a team that you probably don't want to back here too much longer. You're probably playing with fire.
My favorite game on the board is scrolling down there now. I think it's a fascinating game between two potentially top 10 teams in Baylor and Oklahoma State.
Yep.
We know what happened last year, 6 or 7 stops inside the 2-yard line.
Unbelievable game.
Yeah, I mean, it was really incredible. And now Oklahoma State's had a week off before this game as well, even though it's a game at Baylor, weighing everything in there in terms of the revenge factor, the extra time to prepare for this game, the fact that Baylor is playing so well and being coached so well. Yep. What do you think about this game?
This is kind of something else we were talking about before in terms of like getting a feeling about a certain team. Oklahoma State, what do you know about Oklahoma State? But they play Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Central Michigan, and somebody else. Like, we don't know anything. Like, is Spencer Sanders really that much better? Are the replacements at running back and wide receiver okay? The change defensive coordinator, like, is their defense actually okay, or is it more of what they showed against Central Michigan? Like Baylor, we know they went head to head in Provo with BYU. They went to Iowa State and won convincingly. They're certainly, and Dave Aranda is a guy that I think he's one of the better coaches right now in the game. People talk about like new school, old school. He's really blended kind of like the old school defensive-minded philosophy with how he's won games as a defensive coordinator, with bringing in an offensive coordinator in Jeff Grimes, who isn't afraid to be new school and go for it on fourth down quite often because it's a positive win probability play and going for it. So the direct – I was surprised that this was only 2.5 when it opened. Which is interesting, because that means that there is a lot of respect, I think, out there for Oklahoma State. I'm probably going to sit on the sidelines on this one because I think Baylor is the better team. But at the same time, the fact that it's under a field goal, I think leads me to believe that there's a lot of respect for Oklahoma State. So I'm really curious to see how this game plays out.
Yeah, that line made no sense to me at all. I was looking forward to discussing that with Ron. Do you have any comments on that while we're on it?
I'm not surprised Baylor's favored. I think my numbers would have come out 3, but I intentionally lowered it under 3 because of Oklahoma State's situation with the revenge and having a week off. It doesn't play as well on the road, that situation, as it does at home. I just think it's a fascinating game, and the win, given the fact that I think these coaches are in my opinion, a better overall coach than Steve Sarkisian is at Texas, and that Oklahoma has a new coach. And we all love what Kansas is doing, but we don't know how sustainable that is, and so on and so forth. The winner of this game, to me, is the favorite in the conference.
I would agree with that. The other game in the conference that I kind of like this week as well is TCU. I know they're coming off of a win against SMU in a rivalry game, and their old coach got the win against his former school. And Oklahoma's got the urgency of, after losing at home, as a double-digit favorite last week. But this number opened to 4.5. I think it's up to 6.5 now. I didn't think Oklahoma was head and shoulders above everybody else in the Big 12 prior to the year. I think their defense showed a lot of vulnerability again on Saturday night. It wouldn't surprise me at all if TCU won this game outright on Saturday.
Ron, what kind of tracking information do you have in those situations where you get an Oklahoma double-digit favorite? They just have a bad loss like that. Are you charting the frequency of how they rebound or lack of rebound?
Sometimes it's team specific, and with Oklahoma, unfortunately, I can't use any charts here because past Oklahoma coaches were some of the best at rebounding after any loss.
Bob Stoops was unbelievable at that.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking 70% against the spread rebounding after a loss, and I think that's low. I may be charting wrong numbers there because they were just unbelievable. But I suspend everything when there's a new coach unless it's a seamless transition, and it's not a seamless transition to me when a new coach comes over and hasn't been with the team for several years. So I can't chart it. We're in uncharted territory to me.
Did you want to still talk about the Clemson game, Ron?
No, I think we're good on that. But I listened to something that you said before, and we all have our little way we phrase this. But you were talking about a hold your nose game, and I remember, it's Akron. We all find these games, and we have friends who say, "Why are you betting on that game?" And you're saying, "Because I'm going to win on that game," or something.
New Mexico State, Hawaii.
Is that the hold your nose game this week? Oh, no, that was last week. Yeah,
that was last week.
I think you have to hold your nose and somebody else's nose for that one. But you've got any hold your nose games this week that you want to share with us?
I haven't gone fully through the board yet. Gosh, do you want it? You want to take Arizona State plus the points against USC? I mean, that's a hard team to really back right now. I don't know if I could do that. Chris hit on Michigan State. I think that kind of fits the bill with how poorly the Spartans have played this year, and it seems like Maryland is a team that most people gravitate towards, just the reaction to Michigan State losing the way they have, and Maryland playing well last week. In the other, here's the hold your nose game that I don't necessarily know if I have a play in, but you've got Boise State, San Diego State. You've got a team that's terrible offensively, two teams that traditionally are pretty good, and I don't know if people have caught on as to how bad both of these teams are right now. You got San Diego State as a terrible offensive team, and then you got Boise State, who just fired their offensive coordinator, starting quarterback transferred, and they're probably still the better offense. So that's just going to be fascinating to watch and see. Has the look of an under, that's for sure.
Yes, I agree with that.
Do you have a game that sticks out for you that you just love this week?
I do like Iowa State a lot. I think some of Kansas's. I don't think they're going to be able to continue this offensive pace really, really much longer against. And Iowa State's a team that has a pretty good defense, and you're coming off of a loss, and now you're a short favorite on a team that you've done very well against in years past. I mean, the Kansas story is great, but I think Iowa State's defense is easily the best defense that Kansas has faced this year. I'd be surprised if Kansas had as much success Saturday as they have in the past. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be pretty sure you're going to see that Iowa State and that Bear Claw up there on Saturday morning.
Well, and a piece of good news on that is as you kind of intimated at the start of the show, Kansas is going to be a public dog, and they are down to 3 now. And it wouldn't surprise me if it goes under 3. What do you think, Ron?
Well, I think, I try to update, or I do update my power ratings all the time, every week, as everybody should. And I pay attention to whether I was off or not off. And I think I have these teams power rated correctly. But if I have them power rated correctly, I have Iowa State as a 7-point favorite. So I think there's just a little too much value. I mean, we're talking over 3 points different from my line. That usually triggers a play, especially on the underdog. It doesn't always trigger a play on the favorite. But like you mentioned, this has been a one-sided series. So, I have to go Iowa State as well.
Well, we're going to have to release this video after we get our bets in, because it may raise that line, right?
Yeah.
Last process question that I have for you, Chris. What do you consider is your specialty with handicapping in general? What's your go-to handicap, so to speak? Like for me, it's NFL. That's what I count the best. And other people specialize in totals or props. What's your specialty?
I really like playing soccer unders. I don't think I haven't stumbled upon again, I don't have percentages, I can't prove it. But at the same time, I feel like my success rate or my strike rate with under 2.5 or under 3 in a high stakes soccer match, first leg of a Champions League, a cup final, or a cup playoff game, a match between 2 Premier League contenders, 2 top 4, top 5 teams. I think under 2.5 is almost like a token play for me right now. Do
you play a lot of draws also?
I don't play a lot of draws, but I'll mainly play just the under 2.5, and then a lot of times maybe you'll get 0-0 at half, and then maybe you back it up with an under 1.5 if you're feeling a little frisky as well. But no, draw is not something that I typically play. And I'm curious with the 3-way how that actually shakes down, like how often the draw wins out in that thing as opposed to people playing sides. Is there an edge on playing draw?
But yeah, I mean, I was listening to this podcast and these guys were talking about it for like 15 minutes, and they were saying a lot of people don't want to bet that, and they find a lot of value on the draws. But they said generally you don't want to kind of isolate them just to one game and pick and choose. You want to pick, a tournament or some sort of grouping where you're playing it kind of as a what's the weather? What's the, is this the opening game of Champions League? Is this the World Cup? Try to get a theme to it, so to speak, where that all the teams on that day are going to be doing that, and you just want to hit a few of those.
Like the World Cup the World Cup group play is something that, with the goal differential being a factor in advancing in the group, you do not want to come out that first game and lose 3-0. So those games are usually very tight, and the scoring opportunities are few and far between. I'm curious to see how it plays out this year in Qatar with the heat. I know those stadiums are going to be indoors, but just being over there, and that's something I'm looking at. I think when you look at these teams, when they go back to their domestic teams, when they leave their national team in the World Cup and go back to, like, how does that affect, like, a team like Manchester City, like Haaland he's not going to the World Cup. He's going to be super fresh for Manchester City when Liverpool's players and Chelsea's players and Arsenal's players who were in the World Cup for 4 to 6 weeks, they're going to come back and just be exhausted from playing those games. So I think that's going to be something to follow once the World Cup ends. How does that affect the scoring in the domestic leagues? Tired players, does that mean more goals? Does it mean less goals? Who knows?
Speaking of soccer, we'll get back to Ron's final, but since we're on the topic of soccer, I noticed that you were in South Africa, and I brought that up before, and I've got a funny story around that World Cup, and you said you had a very interesting story about the World Cup. Fire away.
I mean, that was the best thing I've ever been involved in from a work standpoint in my years at ESPN, being over there for that event. But I can remember. One is an actual soccer betting story, and the other is just a fun story. I can remember we decided to go to Monte Casino one night and just play blackjack. And at the time, like, we really had no idea what the exchange rate was. So we're like, we just cashed in a bunch of US dollars and for rand, and we're just playing with just like stacks of chips, and we had a great night. And I think we're like, oh my god, how much did we win? And I came out to like $200 each. So it was like, really, all that? It's $200. It felt like we won a lot more. But I can remember prior to that World Cup, I loved Germany, and I had wheeled Germany with a bunch of teams in the in like the name the finalists props. And prior to the Spain game, Thomas Mueller got a red card or does second yellow and missed that match, and they wound up, I think, losing 1-0 to Spain. Of course, Netherlands made the final. I think I had like a Netherlands Germany name the finalist prop at like 90-1 or something like that. And I still, to this day, I know Spain won the World Cup that year, but I still, to this day, say Germany was the best team in that tournament, and I was robbed of a 90-1 shot.
This is, I got to tell everybody this story because it's one of my favorite stories about my wife. And we were in Singapore, and I had, the World Cup was ready to start, and Shakira, they're playing that song, Waka Waka.
Waka Waka.
And so the wife is, and this is early in our relationship, and the wife is shopping for clothes, and she grabs a few things. And so I played a practical joke on her, and I said, listen, don't forget to get the 10% discount. She goes, what are you talking about? So, you got to go up to the counter and say Waka Waka, and then you get 10%. So she goes, okay. And then I see her go up to the counter, and I'm just ready to lose my stuff as I watch it. So she goes, Waka Waka. And the lady looks at her like hey, and she goes, Waka Waka again. She's like, what are you talking about? Don't I get a 10% discount? It's just hilarious on the spot moment that just came to my head, and she followed through, and she laughed her ass off about it also. But I thought that was funny.
No, I did not bring a Vuvuzela home.
But I want to know, did you get the 10% discount?
No 10% discount, but I got a memory that lasts forever. It was so funny. Ron, what you got any other words of wisdom?
I have no other words of wisdom. I appreciate Chris's words of wisdom and the interplay where we talked about a number of different topics and fleshed out some new stuff. So I really appreciate that. It's always great to hear other people's opinions and how they go about doing their business. And you're a busy guy, and you're still manage time to read the box scores and do all the things necessary, because it's hard to win. And so you have to do everything you can to get the edge.
It really is. I'm glad you said that about like opinions and listening, because I think you're out in the gambling Twitter space, and you know how it can be sometimes. And it's I'm right, you're wrong, my way's right, your way's wrong. How do you get any better if you don't learn? Like, the first thing I do after if I lose a bet, okay, why did I lose? Was it a bad bet? Was it a bad beat? Did something happen? Is it a bet that I would make again? Did I just like listening to other people's opinions, learning different ways of looking at games? Like, all of that helps all of us. So like the angst that some people show towards other, it's amazing. It's like, don't we all have the same goal to beat the book and win? Like, should be helping each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's I'm noticing with the new breed of handicappers, there's a lot of ego, there's a lot of pining away for attention, there's the unwillingness to work with others sometimes, and I even see them ridiculing people that work with other people, and this is something you want to have as many friends as possible. You want to have a network of people to reach out to that have their various specialties and have their various access to information. Chris says he's got this great idea. He's got access to the Gatorade things, and we're going to put some huge laxatives in the Gatorade in one of these games, and it's going to be a good play for it.
Absolutely. I'll do that Saturday night in the sidelines down at Clemson. Nobody will ever notice me down there.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Chris, really appreciate you joining, and I'm sincere about how sincere of a great guy you are.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Ron and I appreciate you joining us, and we will blackmail you or coerce you to come back
Perfect.
and
Please
return for a future visit, possibly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to. It's great talking to you. I think as we get closer to bowl season or the college football playoff or the NFL playoffs or something like that, that would be very enjoyable.
Yeah, that's a good timing for that, and then we wish you the best of luck this week, and have fun out on the as you go state to state on game day.
I will.
Yeah, keep it up on the keep it up in the contest. I'm failing miserably. I'm hitting the worst year ever.
It's funny. Peter Alice, the great golf announcer at the BBC, would always have the line of when they go through the entire leaderboard and they see the person in last place, he'd always be like, and there's Tommy Fleetwood propping up the field. It was such a polite way of saying that. It's a polite way of saying finishing in last place.
Yeah, you know what? It is what it is, and
exactly.
as you know, when you're in a contest with totals, that's no good unless you're a total specialist.
Correct.
And, we'll see what happens when the bowl season starts and there's not enough NCAA games. How the totals guys do, but again, thanks everybody for joining. Ron and I are going to be back on Friday with Ted. We're going to be discussing 2 games and some other type of stuff. And look forward to that. And until we see you guys again, thanks for joining.